Hello, welcome to the first module for Aristotle's The Nico Ethics, or as it's properly known, I'm not saying it.
Okay, I will be the pretentious one.
Yeah.
Nicomachean, I feel.
Oh, of course, the Nicomachean Ethics.
Oh, you know why it's called Nicomachean Ethics?
Why?
Okay, I've forgotten. But
Very
it's
quickly.
something to do with, I think Nicomacheus or whatever was like a teacher of Aristotle's or some dude that
Okay.
Aristotle knew. Maybe his father, someone. So he named it after some guy.
Cool story. Alright, so today we're looking at Book 1, Chapters 7 and 8. So the other part of Book 1 that is examinable, which is Chapters 1 to 5, you will have looked at in class. So that's all good.
No module for that.
No module for that. So this Chapters 7 and 8 is looked at the idea of what is the human good, so the chief good. So he does tell us what that is at the end of chapter 5.
Okay.
He introduces this idea of happiness, and the whole point of those first 5 chapters, I guess if we do a quick recap, is that okay, so he's looking at trying to find the ultimate aim, so I guess the ultimate good.
Yeah.
We're going to use political science to figure that out, because political science is awesome, and it tells the other sciences what to do, so we're going to use political science.
Yeah.
And political science then tells us, particularly these old wise men who know things, tell us that clearly what we are ultimately aiming for, so the chief good, is happiness.
Yeah. Because we do a lot of things in life for individual reasons. Like, I just ate some ice cream and cake. I did that because it was yummy.
It was very yummy.
But then Aristotle's point is like, why do I enjoy yumminess? Because it gives me energy.
It's like a student in my class, Joshua, loves KFC. Okay. And so it's like, we were talking about this actually when we were doing that part of the text, in that he doesn't go to KFC. Well, he does go to KFC to eat KFC. Yeah. That's like that aim at that point. But the ultimate aim he's trying to fulfill is
to feel happy.
To feel happy.
And once you get to feeling happy, there's no other thing you're aiming for.
Yeah.
You're just aiming for happiness, which is why Aristotle calls it like the ultimate good or the chief good. Yeah. It's the only thing you do for its own sake.
Yeah, great. And that's a perfect segue. Almost a perfect segue, because it's really important to clarify that when he's talking about happiness, he's not talking about a cheery, smiley, all happy, happy, perky person in that way, but he's talking about somebody who is flourishing and somebody who's reached their full potential, okay? So they're kind of awesome. So yeah, they're going to be smiling some of the time.
Well, the thing is that we use the word happiness, but that is not actually the word that Aristotle was using in the Greek. Yeah. He was using the word eudaimonia, which doesn't have a direct translation into English. So the closest thing is happiness, but actually it means more like flourishing.
Yeah, and that's in your key terms section of your course notes. I should have mentioned at the start, that as we're going through this, because we won't have much time in class to go over this, you should be using your course notes and filling in your course notes as we go. So the particular pages for this module are pages 8 and 9 of your course notes. So clearly here I've made a typo, and it shouldn't be what, but instead why is happiness the final good? Sorry about that. And here it's like that idea that what we were talking about before, basically, that he's said that old wise men who know stuff know that happiness is the final good. Okay, great. But he kind of then wants to, at the start of chapter 7, back that up by saying that happiness is also the final good, and these are in your course notes at the top of page 8, because it meets certain key criteria. So and this is what Misfits was saying just before, it's desired for in itself rather than the sake of something else. It is self-sufficient in that it lacks nothing. Okay, so that's all we need, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. It is considered the most desirable of all things, and it is the end of action. I think I don't quite get the last one, but those 2 middle ones are quite interesting. And in the next slide, there's going to be some questions for evaluation, which are also there in your course notes. And they're probably interesting ones for you to think about and jot some ideas down there. Is there anything else that you consider, or you think many people would consider, the most desirable? Is that what does happiness meet that for you?
Yeah. For me, it does, I think. Well, does it? It just seems to be what everyone wants, you know? Like, you want to buy a nice new dress, but why do you want to buy that nice new dress? Do you want it just because it's a nice new dress? Or do you want it because it makes you happy? You want it because it makes you happy. That's the thing that you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So.
But I guess there's other things like the only other thing I can think of is love. Like love.
Yeah, what's the point of love?
Yeah, well, true. But love doesn't necessarily make you happy. But some people, I haven't decided if I believe this yet or not, but some people would say that is like the ultimate goal, even if it doesn't make you happy.
That's stupid. That would be a terrible life.
Well, that's what the Bible says.
Oh, I was thinking love in terms of, like, being in love.
No, not necessarily romantic love. Just like...
Okay, sorry, my bad. Yeah, I get what you mean. Okay, think, people. And here's those questions, which are also in your course notes, and maybe just take the time now to kind of pause and think about that. Okay, so the second part of these two chapters that we're looking at is the idea of, okay, well, what then is the nature of happiness? So the first part of the chapters was looking at saying that the chief good is happiness, and then he's going a bit deeper into what this happiness actually means and looks like. So... Is
that where he says, doesn't he say, well, most people would recognise that happiness is the chief good, but what it actually is requires further explanation?
Yes, exactly.
That's pretty much exactly what you just said.
Yeah, thanks. So his response to that is that we need to look at function. So he says that when we look at somebody like a flute player, the reason we think they're a good flute player is that, so the reason that they've got the chief good of a flute player is because they're good at playing the flute. So they're good at that function. Okay?
So the function of a flute player is to play the flute.
Yes.
The function of a sculptor is to make sculptures.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
And so in order to be a good one of any of those, you have to fulfill that function well.
Yeah. Okay, so this is our standard form argument, which is at the bottom of page 8 of your course notes. And we haven't given you the whole thing here because we want you to push yourself and try and come up with a couple of the premises.
Fulfill your function as students.
Yeah, cool. So, the function argument. Premise 1 is that human beings have a function. So the reason he has for this, and you need to write this in, well, what's the reason, Misfits? Why does he think human beings have a function?
Doesn't he go on about all the... Okay, so humans have all these different parts to them, like hands and feet and eyes. Yeah. And all of those constituent parts have individual functions. Like, the function of an eye is to enable you to see.
Yeah.
So he has this, in my opinion, quite invalid argument about, well, all the different parts of a human have a function, therefore the human as a whole must have a function.
Yeah. Okay, so that's your reason for that premise. Yes, definitely something that could be evaluated. So hold on to that idea. So I think there's space there for evaluation, so if there is, evaluate away. Okay, so that's premise 1. And then we've got our conclusion down the bottom there, that reason is the human function because it is unique to humans. So he gets there, and you should look in the text and get some clarity around this, and is by saying that, well, the human function, cannot be life, and by life he means nourishment and nutrition, I believe, because that is also what plants have as a function.
Basically, sorry, can I butt in?
Yeah.
He has there's a premise in this argument which states that if something is a function of something, it must be unique to that thing.
Yeah.
So, like, if for the function of humans, we need to be finding something that only humans can do.
Okay, so because this is probably confusing you because there's now not enough spots in their standard form argument to include that premise, that it does need to go in there. what you should do is add a fourth premise. So your second premise can be what Miss Fitz just said, which is that there must be a function that is unique to humans.
The function of humans needs to be something unique. That is unique to humans.
Yeah, sorry, that's right. And then your premise 3 and your new premise 4 are to do with these. So the fact that the human good is not life, meaning nourishment and nutrition, because it's shared with plants.
So he's basically going through some potential functions.
Yes.
And showing how they're not unique to humans. Yes. And therefore they can't be the function of humans.
Definitely.
So yeah, life is not unique to humans. Yeah. Nourishment is not unique to humans because plants can do them.
Yeah. And then with the animal one, it's that the human function is not perceptions because animals also perceive things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So therefore...
So that leaves us with reason.
Again, this whole argument is invalid because why would he just assume that it's reason? Like, he hasn't gone through every possible function in the world.
Yeah. It's very weird.
But, sorry, can we define reason just really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. You want me to do it? Reason, like, well, you know this, but using your brain and your sense of logic. So he reckons that is the only thing that is unique to humans, which again, sorry to keep evaluating, but is that really the only thing that's unique to humans? Some people would say the capacity to be cruel to others is unique to humans.
Yeah.
And actually, is reason actually unique to humans at all? Can some animals, like elephants, reason?
Well, elephants can maybe not elephants because they're pretty cool, but other animals can definitely be cruel, surely.
Right. Well, we can debate all these things, but basically, we're asking: is Aristotle right to say that reason is unique, the only thing unique to humans? So
we, and by we I mean particularly Miss Fitz, has given you a lot of evaluation points there, so make sure you've written those down as well.
So after he's made that whole argument, this allows him to conclude, well, what is the...
human good.
Yeah, so does that mean what is the chief good for humans?
He's already said that's happiness.
Happiness. So, but how do we get to happiness?
Yeah.
Kind of. So, in order to be a good version of a human, remember, we have to fulfill our function well.
Yeah. So the reason is like...
our function is reason.
Yeah.
So therefore, in order to be a good human, we need to reason well.
Yeah, so that's potentially your conclusion down the bottom. So there's a standard form for this on page 9. So just in there, your premises, and then on the slide there, and then your conclusion is that a good human reasons.
Yeah.
Reasons well. Cool. All right, so the last thing, and the third part of these two chapters is, and this is chapter 8 in particular, Aristotle then goes, well, okay, so if happiness is the chief final good, okay, and it's achieved by reason, in particular, happiness, I'm going to have to kind of assess and compare that against other commonly held views about happiness. Yeah,
so he's saying... Aristotle, I guess, is giving like a new argument about all of this, about what happiness is and how we achieve it. Yeah. So he's saying, well, how does my argument compare to arguments that people have previously put forward about happiness? So one argument that people have previously put forward about happiness is...
that, there's the first one that he goes on about in the chapter, which we're just going to quite quickly go over these because they're not super important. But the first one that he goes on about is how goods are divided into 3 classes. Those are that external, those related to the body, those related to the soul.
The soul?
Oh, my bad. That's terrible. I've copied that from your course notes as well, so that would be in your course notes. Okay, so another typo, Tim O typo, and the response he gives to that, if you look in the chapter, is along the lines of that happiness is particularly to do with those related to the soul, so that's the type of good it is. View 2 is to do with happiness being living and faring well. Again, we want you to read over this chapter and add a bit more detail, so we're just skimming here. But living and faring well, he basically just says, yeah, that fits really good with my idea of happiness. Okay?
Because for Aristotle, happiness is eudaimonia, which is flourishing.
Yes.
So if you're living well and faring well, that seems to fit with what he's saying.
Yeah, definitely. And then the third one being to do with virtue and philosophic or practical wisdom. Well, we're definitely going to find, especially in the next book, that he's all about this particular idea of virtue. So yes, that definitely fits well. Happiness being accompanied by pleasure. Now, this is probably the most important one here. So he says that, yes, the happiness that I'm talking about, that good of happiness, it does fit with pleasure. Now, what's really important is that we compare this to the idea of pleasure of, say, Callicles in the previous text. Yeah, which was very much focused on fulfilling your desires and giving in to whims and doing things that are somewhat bad for you, maybe, but being just driven by that pleasure. And here he's saying it's just kind of like enjoyment. It's just, he's saying, if you're living this happy, fulfilled, full life, which is what he thinks happiness is, then you will feel some pleasure, some like happiness.
Well, so he's kind of saying, okay, he is not saying happiness is just going after every pleasure. But he is saying if you live this life where you're fulfilling your function well, you're naturally going to end up enjoying it. So it's going to bring you some pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
So happiness kind of goes along with pleasure, but it's not the hedonistic life.
Yeah, so that's what's really important, that you knowing that there's this different idea of pleasure that he's talking about here. So don't confuse them. And finally, he says happiness involves external prosperity.
So what does that mean, like being rich?
Well, not necessarily being rich, but by like having some wealth and some property and stuff like that. And he says that, well, I think he kind of says that basically any life is going to involve or require you to have some of that.
Yeah, he does say that, doesn't he?
So that goes along with, his version of happiness. This is a
moment where he kind of contradicts himself in a way. Like, he goes on about happiness requires you to fulfill your function well, but then he says, oh, but by the way, it also requires you to have a bit of money. And
I don't know if he's saying that it requires that, though. I think he's saying that, well, here's my version of happiness. Here's all these things that other people are saying happiness is. My version of happiness doesn't necessarily rule them out. They can sit alongside.
Okay.
But I wouldn't think he goes so far as to say require. I don't know. I don't know if that's splitting hairs. But
right, yeah.
Yeah, anyway. Okay, cool. That's that module. Make sure you fill in all those course notes. We're expecting them full for class. Bye.